Alright, so this is the SubKiller game, which is going along with section 6.4, talking about timers and key events and focus events. So you can see in this one, when I click off, when I click off the focus, it is clearly different. The game is paused, and this is like this, and I can click to activate it, and I can move it around. So this little simple game demonstrates all of the features that we've been talking about so far. So hopefully you've already gone through this worksheet and planned out what you think it should be. We are going to be doing a couple of tasks here. We're going to go through the file and make sure we understand the original source code. And if you noticed, the original source code is all in one file, and so we want to do a better job stylistically, and so we want to separate that out into these different classes. So we'll call them panel, boat, listener, submarine, and bomb. And we'll just note what kind of issues arise when we have separate classes instead of everything being all in one file. Alright, so let's look at the original file. One thing to note is there's actually two timers, and so you want to make sure that you import the timer that's in the javax.swing package, not the java.util timer. That's a different timer altogether. Alright, so we've got main method kind of inside this JPanel class. We could even separate that out into a different one altogether. We've got our timer, and then we've got our three main objects, our main things that are appearing in the game. And so if we take a look here, the interesting thing to know about this design is that all of the listeners are done inside anonymous inner classes. Again, that's where I say, normally we can't say new action listener because that's an interface, but when you're defining what that does in here with the little brackets plus the semicolon, you're saying, I'm not even going to give it a name, but this is what this anonymous action listener is going to do. And this is action performed. Again, this is every time the timer ticks. It just says, hey, as long as boat is not null, that would be if the game's not started yet, update everyone for the new frame, and then repaint so that I can see that, right? So this is going to update all the data, and this is going to update it so people can see it. Again, timer, when you create a new timer, you pass in who is the listener going to be, right? And this is called action, so I'm giving it this guy right here. Is kind of hooking up the timer to this guy. My mouse listener. Again, we're going to separate this out, but in the future, if you want to do it like this, it's a little bit shorter, definitely. We have this anonymous inner class, and we don't even have to define all the mouse pressed, mouse clicked, all these guys. When you use a mouse adapter, it defines all the ones for you, and then you just have to implement the ones that you want, which in this case is pressed. So we're saying whenever I push a button, I request focus inside the window. The focus listener lets me do stuff like start the timer when it gained focus, stop the timer when it's lost focus, and then I repaint, which will cause, we have a different check inside the paint component to see if it's going to be blue or gray border. And then finally, my key listeners checking, all right, if I click to the left, I'm going to update the boat center this way, to the left, to the right, I update the X coordinate to the right, and then down, I just changed this boolean. Again, I'm not drawing anything, I'm just updating the state of these guys here. Alright, so paint component, again, is what is going to be called every time I call repaint. And the main thing is if boat is null, this is kind of how they check for if the game has not started yet. The reason we don't do this in the constructor is because we don't have the get height and width at the time. It doesn't have a height and width, and so the sub would be drawn kind of off the screen because you don't have, they'd all be 0. Now we can grab the width and height in pixels and create all these objects. And then again here we're just checking based on that boolean. Do I have the focus? If so, draw it in blue. Otherwise, draw it in black. And then here, again, this is just a little bit better style where we say, instead of doing all the drawing data inside paint component, each boat, the boat object knows how to draw itself, the sub object knows how to draw itself, so on and so forth. And so we're kind of passing off that drawing, which is fine. You can do that to each of those guys. All right, so the boat keeps track of its X and Y, and we, in the update for new frame, it just makes sure that its state, its center has not moved off the screen in either case. And we just draw it. How do we draw it? We just draw it as a rectangle. Okay, the bomb, in addition to having X and Y, it's got this Boolean, whether it's falling or not. And so this one has got a little bit more complicated calculations. So if it's falling, where there's several states to check, so you can read through those and check them out. Again, absolute value measures the distance between things. So if you subtract the absolute value, you're saying if the distance between my center and the sub-center is within, right, is less than or equal to within 36 pixels, and this will give you either way to the left or the right, because it's absolute value. Same thing, if my y values are within 21 pixels of each other, that's close enough. And so we're just setting that Boolean. We're not drawing, but we're setting the Boolean, and they kind of have this interesting way of doing the explosion. You can read through and check that out. Otherwise, if it's not, it just kind of falls down. Okay, so if it's falling, you're going to do all these things. Otherwise, you're not going to do anything. Okay, so my draw method, again, this is called every time paint component is called. If it's not falling, it should just be attached to the boat, just offset a little bit so you can see it. So yes. Finally, the submarine. So the submarine is actually going to be the one exploding. That's why there's no exploding bomb here. The submarine is the one exploding, so that's where the explosion kind of logic is located. So the submarine just has a couple booleans left, if it's moving left, if it's exploding, and then what frame number. So you can check those out again. So how do I update for the new frame? The most complicated is if it's exploding, we kind of have this animation based off the frame number, which reaches 15, it stops. So it's going to keep getting kind of bigger and bigger until it reaches 15, at which point it stops. Okay, so you can read through those. It's going to be kind of random, one frame after 25, right? Because random gets something between 0 and 0.99999, so this is like 4 chances out of 100, basically. It's going to switch directions, and then we're just going to set the state either 5 to the left or 5 to the right based off which direction it's moving. Okay, and again, the drawing for the sub includes the exploding logic, so just check that out and see if it's exploding. Again, you can see it's based off of this frame number that starts at 1, goes to 15, so that's why it gets bigger and bigger. Okay, now this works, but we want to separate this out for better style, and we're going to note what kind of problems come up or issues as we do it. All right, so first let's start by creating all of our different classes. So let's just go and create them all. In fact, let's create one for the main as well, just to keep that separated. So let's call it SubKiller main. And so SubKiller main, let's just cut, sorry, not cut, we should copy all these so we have an original copy as well. Okay, so SubKiller main is just going to be the main method here, so we're separating out that functionality. SubKiller panel is going to be our panel. So SubKiller panel, whoops, didn't let me do that. SubKiller panel. And let's go ahead and create all these classes before we start working on them. So SubKiller panel, SubKiller listener, and then our 3 game entities. So we have bomb, and boat, and submarine. Okay, so let's start with the SubKiller panel. So let's look at this and think to ourselves, all right, first off, this is not really a SubKiller panel until we have it extending JPanel. So let's have it extends JPanel. Okay, we'll have to import that. Let's just import javax.swing.star. Okay, so in my original, I had all these guys. Let's think about this. Well, for now, I guess we can go ahead and let's just copy and paste all of these guys for now into our panel. We'll see what happens here. Okay. Okay, so my panel will have a timer, width and height, boat, bomb, and submarine. And next up, remember a panel has to have, well, it doesn't have to, but it's probably a good idea to have our constructor, so SubKiller panel. But if we look back at the original SubKiller panel, what are they doing inside of this constructor? They're doing a lot of stuff with creating listeners and registering them all in one step, which is the anonymous inner class, for the mouse listeners, for the action listener, for the timer, for the focus listener, for the key listener. And so we have actually been doing most of this code inside our listener class, right? We have a separate listener class. So we don't want to do this all inside the panel, right? This is mixing the functionality of the panel and the listener. So we're actually not going to do most of this inside the panel class. Let's just for now do the set background call, and that will be it. And then we'll come back to this and see what else we need to do. Okay. So for now, we'll leave it like that. And then, of course, our panel should have a paint component method. So we're overriding, right? You can even add the little override tag if you want. Paint components. Graphics G. Whoops, noticing that I have to capitalize this as an annotation, just letting Java know that if it's not actually an override, it'll cause an error. It's just a way to prevent you from making a little spelling mistake here and not knowing why it doesn't work. Import graphics, make sure that is done. Okay, so let's think about what needs to happen inside the paint component of our panel. Let's look at the original. So all this can probably just come in there. Let's see, let's think about our logic. So if the boat is null, kind of doing all this stuff here, that looks pretty good, and then we're gonna have to draw all this stuff. Okay, this looks pretty good. So I'm just gonna grab everything, including the draw calls, and I'm just gonna copy it, and let's just paste it inside, and we'll see if there's any problems that come up. But for now, I think we're good. Now notice it's going to error this because we don't have a boat yet, but that's okay. Alright, well we have a boat, we don't have a draw method inside boat. Alright, so now the panel is kind of taking shape here. Let's talk about the listener. Okay, so the listener class. So the listener class should do all of the stuff we did, except we're going to do a little bit more conventionally. So let's think to ourselves, what does it have to implement? Well, the listener has to do all the stuff that we did here. Key listener, focus listener, mouse listener, and action listener. Okay, so we're going to have to write that. Implements key listener, focus listener, mouse listener, action listener. Okay, so I'm just going to import java.auth.event.star and okay, and Eclipse will add all these for me, which is nice. Okay, so now we can just basically try to fill in, and we'll just see again what issues come up if I just try to copy and paste everything. So let's jump back to the panel. So it was in the, the original. So first off, inside, so the action listener. With every tick, I want to repaint, of course, and then I also want to update all these guys with their new frames. So let me just copy this, go to listener, paste. All right, so we can see that we've got some issues here, right? So I don't have a reference to the boat, the bomb, or the sub inside my listener class. Now, I suppose I could put all these references here, but that's a lot of work. Remember, actually a listener can access things nicely through a reference to the panel it's listening on. So instead of trying to add references to boat, bomb, and stuff like that, let's just add a reference to SubKiller panel, right? This is the method that we've been doing. SubKiller panel, and let's just call it game panel. Okay, right? Again, this is just a reference to the panel the game is played on. All right. Now, since I've got action performed in here, action performed will be called with every tick of the timer. So I think it's actually more convenient, rather than trying to pass messages back and forth, to have the timer inside here. Right, the timer that generates the ticks, which we'll call this, with every tick, 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 it'll call this. Since that's generated by the timer, let's just have the timer be with the listener instead of with the panel. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the panel, and the panel is going to not have this timer. I'm just going to cut this. This does not need to be here. So we can cut all that, and let's go back to the listener. And so the timer will be needed here. Again, we want the java x.swing.timer. And okay, so now we've got that. So now we have access to this. This just makes things a little bit easier. Okay, so inside, let's create a listener constructor. SubKiller listener. Oops, public. Okay, so remember, what we often do inside our listener constructor is pass in a reference to the panel. And this allows us to hook up the panel that it's listening on to the listener. Okay, now that we've got that, we've got a timer as well. It's not actually pointing to anything though, so let's go ahead and do timer equals new timer. And let's just do every 30 milliseconds like he did. And I suppose you could have kept it in the panel, but because now we have it in the listener, right, where is the listener? Where's the guy that does action listener? Now that we've moved it over, it's just this. Okay. And if you do this and you forget, remember a timer has to start. So timer.start. So this is every time I create a new listener, I start the timer and it just starts going bam, bam, bam every 30 milliseconds. Okay. So we've got that, and so now this is going to help us out a little bit. We've got a reference to the panel as well. Also, don't forget, we have to register. So let's go ahead and register the listener. Okay, so the game panel is the component dot add. All right, so who are our listeners? We got a mouse listener, this. Game panel dot add key listener, this. Game panel dot add focus listener, this. Right, this is for the presses. This is for the left and right and down keys, and this is for the turning it gray, turning it blue, things like that when you lose focus. And again, timer. There is no game panel dot add action listener. Right? Because JPanel doesn't generate action events. Right? Who generates them? Action events are generated by timers, J buttons when you click them, J menus, J text fields, things like that. Okay, so that's why this registration looks a little bit different. We have a timer, and we always know that we have to have some listener, so this is our registration right here. So this is our register. Okay, so this registers our action events. Okay, so let's go ahead and walk through this a little bit. So action performed, we'll come back to this in a second. For our mouse, what was the only one that we used for the original? So for the original, our mouse listener just used mouse pressed, and all it did was request focus. All right, it request focus. So in our listener class, we'll go to mouse pressed and we'll just say, now not this dot request focus, it's going to be game panel dot request focus. I believe it's request focused in Windows, the newer version. Okay, so that will shift it so that it's got a focus. So all the other ones are just, we can ignore them here. Focus gained and focus lost, let's take a look at those. So focus gained, remember we're just going to start the timer. I'll just type it because it's quick. And then we stop the timer when the focus is lost, so it stops animating. Now remember, that just stops the internal kind of clock. We want to make sure that we repaint as well, so that way we also see those changes. We see the border changing as well. Remember, once I gain the focus or lose the focus, after we do this, we use has focus in SubKiller panel to check what color to draw the border. Right? So if you're having trouble following that, that's what happens. Game panel dot repaint. Okay. Now for the key events, key typed is for a character, right? Key typed is for any character like capital A or lowercase a. That's not in the game so much. It's just key pressed is what we care about. Okay, key pressed. And remember, the difference is key typed generates a char. You can actually get the char here. We're not going to use it though. Not used. And then key press, because it's just a press of a key, it's actually an int. It's a key code. E.key code. So please remember that difference. Key typed, you can grab a char, and then pressed is a code, which we use the kind of static constants of vk, underscore this, vk underscore that, so on and so forth. And so I'm just going to copy and paste the rest because that's a lot of typing. So let's go and just copy this. Actually, I'll just paste over that because I already did it over there. Whoops, didn't need this. And I guess it's e.getKeyCode. Okay, so we've got some issues though, because again, we have got references to the boat and to the bomb that we're going to have to deal with. So what do we have to do about this? Well, rather than again having a reference to the boat inside the listener, let's go through the game panel. Game panel. Now, a game panel has its own boat and bomb and submarine, but these are properly encapsulated, they're hidden. So what we need to do is just have some getters and setters. We're going to go to Eclipse, and we're just going to go to Source, Generate Getters and Setters, or you can just type it manually. Boat, bomb, and sub are all we really need, I think. We can do width and height if we decide we need them later. Boat, bomb, and sub. Okay, and they're generated right here, so I'm going to put them actually more towards the bottom. Okay, so now we have a way in the listener, so we can say game panel dot get boat dot, and now we see here also I'm setting the center X of the boat, so it looks like I'm going to have to add some setters for this as well. So let me go to boat and bomb, we need to actually fill these in completely. So let's go ahead, go to the original here, and we'll just copy them as is and try to sort it out. So boat, bomb, so we'll do bomb and submarine. And boat. All right. So these are in here now, and I guess we do need a width getter. So let's think about this. What are we going to do? How are we going to get the width of the panel from the boat class now that it's separate? Well, in this case, I guess we can include then some a reference to the panel that the boat belongs to. Okay, so if we need that information, we can just go ahead and add it. Private SubKiller panel, game panel. Okay, and with that, I should be able to get a reference there. So in my constructor, let's go ahead and add a reference to a SubKiller panel. Okay. Now, we want to also we need to add a get width from the panel here. So let's go ahead and generate another getter from the SubKiller panel so that we can grab the width and the height right here. So let's go to source, generate getters and setters for height and width. Let's see where to put. There it is. Okay. So now in these ones like boat, I could do center X equals game panel dot get width divided by 2. All right, and update for new frame. So we'll also have to do this as well. Game panel dot get width. All right, and then I've got my draw as well, and my update for new frame. Okay, so that's boat. Boat is probably the simplest one. Let's take a look next at bomb. So let's go to bomb. All right, so bomb as well. Now bomb is probably going to have to know about the panel because it needs to know the height of the panel. So let's go ahead and add that. SubKiller panel, game panel. Let's make it private. So we'll pass in a SubKiller panel here as well. Okay, now we should be able to access the height of the game panel. So game panel dot get height. There it is. So we're just demonstrating how adding getters and setters are going to be crucial. Now we can see also though we have another issue is that we need the subs center X and we need the subs center Y. We need the subs is exploding, so on and so forth, to draw the bomb. So it looks like we're going to have to communicate with the submarine in the bomb class as well. And in fact, if you scroll down in the draw class as well, we're going to have to communicate with the boat. We need to get the boat's center X and center Y. So let's go ahead and go to the boat class and subclass. Well, actually, since we're going to need those, let's go ahead and add those references now. So we need a reference to a boat. All right, so this is a reference to the boat object. The bomb object is associated with. And same thing here, private submarine sub. Okay, so how do we get these hooked up properly? Well, I think the easiest way would be to pass it in when you're creating the bomb object. This is the bomb, boat object. Boat and submarine. So this dot boat equals boat. This dot sub equals sub. Let's go ahead then and well, I guess let's look at this again. Sub dot center x. If we look at submarine, center x is not private, and really it should be. So we're going to practice proper encapsulation. So let's go ahead and make sure that these are all private, which will make it so we cannot just directly access those variables. That would not be a good idea. Okay, so submarines variables are all encapsulated. Okay, so if submarines variables encapsulated, going back to the bomb class, we can't just do this. We have to do sub.get. Oops, we need a getter as well. Sorry about that. So let's jump back to submarine. Let's go ahead and generate getters and setters for all these. So source, generate getters and setters. Center x, center y is exploding and is moving left. And I'm going to, I'm going to put these at the bottom because I keep forgetting to generate them at the bottom. Okay, and you can see which ones you don't need and delete those afterwards. Okay, so now our bomb class should be able to do sub.get center x, sub.get center y, sub.is exploding equals true, so we're going to have to set that. We're going to set sub.set exploding to be true, and we're going to set the explosion frame number to be 1. Okay, keep scrolling down here. Okay, so we're going to need a getter for the boat class as well. I don't think we have one. Yeah, we do not. So let's go ahead and do getters and setters for the boat class as well. So in the boat class, let's generate getters and setters for center x and center y. Okay, and we put these at the bottom. Okay, so in the bomb class, I could say boat.get center x and get center y. All right, so the bomb class looks pretty good for now. The boat class does not really need to know about any of the other guys. It's just kind of doing its own thing, so we don't really need to add too much. Submarine still has a couple things. What are they? Okay, so submarine needs a game panel, right? The game panel reference. So a submarine is going to have to take in a game panel reference as well. Our SubKiller panel. So let's go ahead and do that. SubKiller panel. Let's go down that. Private SubKiller panel. Game panel. Okay, so we'll go ahead and set that right away. Game panel equals panel. And this way we can get the information that we need. So game panel dot get width. Game panel dot get height. So on and so forth. Game GamePanel.getWidth, GamePanel.getHeight. All right, so we're getting there. So these guys are mostly in good shape here, and let's look at the listener class now. Okay, so now we have better ways to do this now. So GamePanel.getBoat, we want to set the center X, right? In the listener, this is in the listener class. We want to set the center X. So GamePanel.getBoat dot set center X. And what do we want it to be? Well, we want it to be the old center X. So this is going to be kind of long, but GamePanel.getBoat dot get center X. And then we want to subtract 15 from that number. Okay, so that's kind of a long one, but that's the same thing here. So we're just going to do the exact same thing here. We're going to set the center X of the boat, GamePanel.getBoat, actually in the listener class, dot set center X to be the original one, plus 15. Plus 15. Okay, bomb is falling. We have getters for that though. So bomb, GamePanel, GamePanel has to go through GamePanel. Get bomb dot is falling. I guess I didn't put that as a private. Let's make that private. We'll encapsulate this properly. Let's generate getters and setters for the bomb as well. I'll do it at the very bottom. Source, generate getters and setters. Alright, so now this is good. We don't want to just say is falling. We'll say get bomb dot is falling as a boolean. If that is false, I'm going to set the GamePanel dot get bomb dot set falling to be true. Alright, so key press looks good. Scrolling up here. Alright, so action performed. So if our GamePanel.getBomb is not null, then we want to do GamePanel.getBomb.update for new frame. Same thing here, GamePanel.getBoat.update for new frame, and GamePanel.getSub.update for new frame. Finally, we want to repaint the game panel. Okay, and it looks like the only thing left to fix is our panel. And so if we look, where is the error in the panel? Going to SubKiller panel, it's here, the constructors. Why are these a problem? Well, this is when we're first starting. We do not have a blank constructor anymore. Remember, our guys have to talk to each other, right? A boat has to know about the panel. The bomb has to know about what panel and the boat that it belongs to, and the submarine is trying to destroy. It needs references to all those. And a submarine needs a reference to just the panel. Okay, so we need to fix that. Okay, so when I create a new boat from here, right, a boat, if you remember, just needs to know about the panel that it's listening on. So I could say new boat this. A submarine needs to know about the panel it's listening on, it's associated with, excuse me, so this. And a bomb needs to know about the panel that it's associated with, so this. But the bomb also needs to know the boat because it has to attach to the boat. So I pass in the boat reference as well. This is fine, it's not null, right? It's already been created right here. And then finally, it also needs a reference to the submarine so that it'll know if it's going to be close enough to explode, right? So Bomb needs all three of these. Once I've got that passed in, everything looks good. What we have to remember to do though is make sure you take out the original, and let's go ahead and add our new SubKiller panel. You can call it whatever you want. Content equals new SubKiller panel. And then we want to create our listeners, new SubKiller listener. And we don't even have to give it a name, we just have to pass in the content, so everything is linked up that way. Pass in content here. And one thing I found with trial and error is one thing that needs to be changed. If you go to the panel, the original author put in this width and height. That is going to, when we separate it, for some reason that kind of messed things up. So if you comment that out, width and height, you actually don't need width and height to be saved because each component has its own get width and get height method at all times. So the only thing you really have to change is if you come down here, instead of using the width instance variable, just use this dot get width. Every component has a get width, every component has a get height, and it was basically setting width and height to 0 and you wouldn't actually see anything on the screen. But if we take out the width and height instant variable, use get width and get height. Go back to main, make sure we've set all the content panel, everything. Request focus in window, you could do that right away, but that means the game will be started right away. If you don't want to do that, there's a couple places you can put it. You can put it inside the constructor right here of the listener. In anonymous inner class, or you could just put it like we did in mouse pressed. But in any case, if we run this, yeah, okay, and everything looks good. It looks like the normal game. So, yep, we are good to go with our refactor. We're going to add on to this as we learn about more components in subsequent sections.